Hi guys, Samantha from Jessima Tutorials here, and today I'm going to show you how to create this necklace. So you've probably seen in the photos in the intro already what it looks like up close, but I just thought that I'd show you the entire design. So this is basically what we're going to end up making. So you can see that we're going to be making all of these red coral beads, and we're going to make these lovely turquoise cylinders, and we're also going to make this really nice donut. And I'm going to show you a nice technique on how to create that donut. And please note that all of the techniques that I show in this are quite large, so if you wanted to tone them down, just miniaturize them. The techniques work just as well in miniature, so do try that out. So on to making the coral. Okay, so now we are going to move on to creating our faux coral. So you're going to need these three colours. So this is colour number 1, number 2, number 3, and you can see that each one gets a little bit brighter. So I've mixed up quite a bit because we're going to need quite a bit for our necklace. So I'd say this is about 2 blocks of clay here. You can use less if you want, but then you're either going to need to make less beads or you're going to need to make the beads smaller. But anyway, if I end up with excess, I can always just store it. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to tear them into strips, just like that, because we want to marble these together. And you can cut them into strips. I just think that tearing it's first off easier and creates a more natural edge as well. So we're going to get areas where they have more colour and areas where they don't have as much colour. So just tear it into little pieces, just like that. And try to keep them in strips, but if they break off like that, that's perfectly fine. But there we are. So I'll just tear that one down, and I'll just do that for the rest of them. And then what we'll do is we'll marble it together. Okay, now you'll just take these strips, now that you've made them, and just pop them together and try and get, you don't want a big bunch of one colour and then another big bunch of a different colour. You want it kind of evenly dispersed. And they don't even have to be lying straight. Just pack it all together into one big log so that we can marble it. Okay, so there we are. Now just roll all of those pieces together, squish them all together, and start twisting. And now when I make my colours, I like to make a lot. And this means that I can use this in future whenever I make coral again. So you don't have to make this much clay. So just twist it, and then roll and twist and roll and so on until you've got a pretty good marble. You want the lines to be quite fine. You don't want to be able to see unless you look closely that there are different colours. You just want it to be a slight striation in the beads. So you want this to be quite a fine twist. Okay, so I've twisted them all, and it's basically, I just had to cut it into 4 pieces to be able to twist it properly, but hopefully you can see that we've got really fine lines. So let me just rub this so that you can see what it looks like. There we are. So all the lines are very fine, and so this is what we're going to be using for our faux coral. So I'll put those aside, and then we are going to move on to making our turquoise. So I just want to use my blade to just scrape away any bits of stuff left over. And so to make the coral, you're just going to need some unconditioned turquoise primer. the reason you want it unconditioned is because you want it to hold its shape pretty well. So I'm just gonna roll that into a cylinder. And now if it's really hard, you might want to take it a few runs through the pasta machine just to warm it up, but you don't want to condition it. You want it to still be quite firm. So by rolling it into a cylinder like this, I'm warming it up and making it a little bit more flexible. So there you can see that it's nice and flexible now, which is good because we don't want it like brittle. So you just want to warm it up a bit before working. And now we do want it in a fairly long cylinder because we're going to be taking our pieces out of this. Okay, just busy reducing it down. And now we're going to need about a whole block of turquoise, maybe more. So I'll just show you this bit and then I'll carry on doing the exact same process with the rest of the turquoise. So you'll reduce it down till about that size. That's about 4 millimeters in diameter. Make it a little bit smaller. Yeah, 4 millimeters with a 4 millimeter diameter. Okay, and then what you're going to do is you're going to twist it off. And now you want to make these quite small. You don't want large pieces. And you're twisting it to get all of those cracked edges, and this is why we don't want to condition it, because otherwise you're just going to kind of get a smooshed edge. So just twist it into these kind of almost rabbit feed pellets, and you'll do that with an entire block and possibly 2 blocks. I'll see how much I have at the end of one block and then decide if I need more. So just carry on twisting, and you can reduce this down into a smaller size so that you have some variation in size, which is nice. So from 4 millimeters in a 4 millimeter diameter snake would be the starting point, and then you would take it smaller from there if you wanted some variation, which is what I want. So just do this for the whole block. And now because they're not conditioned, they're not going to stick to each other badly either, which is good. And mainly the reason it's not conditioned is because I want all of these craggly edges and having it kind of crumbly at the edges, which is what you want. So I'll just carry on doing this, and then I'll show you what to do next after I'm done. Okay, so I ended up doing an entire block of turquoise primo and then another half of a block. So I've got a block and a half of primo turquoise here. So I've decided that that should be enough for all of our beads. So now what I want to do is we want to get a bag, and I'm actually going to use a bigger bag because we've got a lot of clay here. So I'm just going to use a really big bag like this. And what you want to do is I'm just going to put these aside. And this is just to keep it tidy instead of doing it on the tile. So I'm going to open this up and I'm going to bring over some pastels. And now I've chosen a green and a brown. So I've chosen this nice ginger brown and this botanical green, which is the colours that are going to work for me. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring over my blade. I'm going to shave quite a bit in here because remember we have quite a bit of turquoise. And the thing is, you need to be doing all of it at once so that you get a consistent colour. You can't be doing a little bit here, a little bit there, because depending on how much pastel you put in, how much alcohol ink you put in later, how much paint you put in later, you're going to end up with a different effect. So you've got to do it all at once. So I'm going to put in quite a bit of pastel. And now you're going to put in the brown pastel, and you're going to be putting in the green pastel. And now we're using pastel because I want the nice neutral colours. So once I've grated all that I need, I'll show you how much that is. Okay, so I should have enough now. So you can see I've got quite a bit of brown, and then I've also got quite a bit of green. So now I'm going to tip that into the bag. I'm just going to close up the top here and leave quite a bit of air and just mix that around a bit so that we've got a nice consistent colour. Now we are going to add the turquoise. So I'll just pop that bag aside and then I'll bring over the turquoise. Now I want to add it a little bit at a time because I don't want them clumping together, and the point of the pastels is to help keep it from clumping together until we add the alcohol ink. So I'll add just a bit, close up the top and allowing a lot of air in the bag. Then I'm going to shake it around so that we get a nice coating of pastel on there. Then we'll add some more, because we don't add too much because then you might not have grated enough pastel into there and then they end up clumping together. So just add a little bit at a time. And this whole bag method is really nice because you get a much more even coat firstly, and secondly it's tidier as well. It means your tile is kept clean and everything like that. And then shake it up, see if you've got a nice coat. If you did really easily, just continue adding. And then if at some point you do end up not having a very consistent coat, grate in some more of the pastels that you had and continue doing that until you have used up all of the pellets that you grated. Now I'm making quite a bit of clay here. All the methods that I'm teaching you can do in much smaller scale. So you don't have to do it with this much clay. Okay, now hold it and shake it. Okay. So I can see that I'm not getting as nice a consistent colour, so I'm going to grate a bit more pastel and continue until I have finished with this. Okay, so here is what it looks like now that I've finished. You can see that we still do have a bit of irregularity between the colours, which is fine. You do want some irregular colour, but for the most part you can see that it's all coated and it all looks quite nice. So now what we want to do is we want to open this up, and I'm just going to pop that off to the side for the moment, and we're going to prepare our alcohol ink. So what you'll need is a measuring cup, or just any cup will work, you don't need it to be a measuring cup. And you're going to need ginger and botanical alcohol ink, very similar to the colours that we used with the pastels. And what you want to do is you want to put a few drops of each into the cup. Okay, so that was about 20 drops of the green. And now I'll put in a few drops of the brown. And now what this is supposed to do is it's going to seep into the clay. And it is basically, it's going to create this almost skinner blend inside each cell. So I want a specific or a fairly brown colour, but I don't want it to be complete and utter ginger. So I'd probably put in about 20 drops of botanical and about 30 of the brown. Just about, that's a rough guesstimate. Okay, then we're going to spray some alcohol, and this is 99% alcohol, just to bulk this out a bit because I don't want to be using a whole bunch of alcohol ink. And the alcohol ink is quite strong, so we can add some of this alcohol to bulk it out. Now I'm using 99% alcohol. Anything above 60% will work, though the 90 and above is better. So now we've got quite a bit in there. So what we want to do is we want to open this up and tip that in, close it up like before, and shake. Just got a bit up there, and shake it around so that it's nice and wet. And you can see it's starting to pack together. into a clump. And that's fine, but we wanted that coat of mica powder over it just in case the alcohol ink didn't touch all around. So that now we've got a pretty good vein. So just shake it around till you get all of the little bits up together so that you get a ball. Okay, so we've got a little few bits around the edges. Just get those off because you don't want to waste anything. Okay, there we are. So now open and have a check, and these are all loosely packed together. It's quite yucky at the moment, so you want to actually let this sit for a little while. So maybe let this sit for about an hour, and that will allow the alcohol inks to soak in and for it to dry a bit so that you can, you know, pull it apart. But because this whole thing is wet, I can feel that the alcohol inks have penetrated pretty well. So just pop that off to the side and allow it to dry for about an hour. And when we cut it, we're going to get something very similar to this, except that this one I cut straight after I'd taken it out of the bag, so you can see that we have nice veining. But what we want now is for the alcohol ink to actually start seeping into each of these segments. So that's going to take time. So just allow it to sit for a little while and for it to soak. And now what we can do is, I like to take a sample piece or two, just take a little bit and just pop them together, and then I'll bring over a blade and chop them and have a look. And this helps me see if I'm happy with it. And I'm thinking that I do want to add just a little bit, last bit of alcohol ink in there. And what you can do to help it move around is dump a bit of alcohol in here. Then close it again and shake. And that will start penetrating into this. Okay. But now we need this to dry before we can do anything else. So I'll take that out. And now it's quite wet, but you can see that it hasn't penetrated all the way in. So I'm going to go put that off to the side, allow it to dry for an hour, and then I'll show you what to do next. Okay, so I've let it dry for around an hour, and what I've done is I took that big ball after I'd let it dry and just picked it apart a bit. I've left some clumps like this. I haven't picked it into all tiny bits like this, but I have separated it out because now what we want to do is add black paint. So some areas won't have black paint and some areas will have black paint, and that will create some interest. But just slowly pick it apart, and if you get areas where the blue is showing, that's perfectly fine. Okay, so now I'm going to bring over black paint, and any will work. Just make sure that it's compatible with your clay. So if you haven't used the paint before, just check beforehand. I have used this one before, so it will be fine. And it's quite a cheap paint, so I can use quite a bit of it. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to drop it around. And now you might want gloves for this next bit, and actually I think I should go get some gloves. But once you've dropped the paint around, you want to massage it in. Okay, so I've just popped on some gloves. Now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to slowly start mixing it around. And I've kept it on the bag because that's what it was on before. But just so long as the surface that you're using isn't porous, so you can wipe away the paint, any surface will work. I'm using a ceramic tile. Just make sure that you don't mind getting black paint on it, because this is quite messy. Now you can see I'm not squeezing these, I'm just gently coaxing the paint in. So I'm just kind of tossing it all over the place. and this will add some darker veins in there, but we didn't want the paint in all of the veins. You want some lighter veins, you want some darker veins, and it will create some more interest in here because you want it to look natural. And now we're not going to squish this all together, we just want to massage the paint in and just break up some clumps if the clumps look too big. Just gently massage this in, just like this. And now you really want to make sure that you spend enough time doing this, so it's not like a 2-minute process. You want to really spend some time making sure that you get into all of those little bits and gaps and break up some pieces that might seem a little bit too large, and just make sure that you really get it all together. Okay, so I'll work on this for a little bit longer, and then what you'll do is once you're finished and happy that you've got enough paint in it, before you smush it all together, allow the paint to dry, and this will mean that it will be easier to bond these pieces together later when we want to make our turquoise piece. And so basically I'll probably leave this for another hour just to make sure that the paint is dried, and just spread it out onto my tile so that it has some more space to dry. But just before you do that, just go through, grab these clumps that are a little bit big and just break them up, and this will make our turquoise look really nice. Okay, so it has dried. It's been about an hour and I've just shuffled it around to see how dry it is. It's not completely dry, but it's fine for the moment. We're going to let this rest overnight just to make sure that everything is dry before we start cutting into it, but I want to form my cane about now. So what we're going to do is we're going to just grab all these pieces and gently start pressing them together. Don't move too hurriedly with this because you don't want to squish these shapes too much. Just gently start forming it into a lump like that, and just gently start pressing it together because we want a cane that we can cut pieces out of. And there you can see that it's pretty dry. Okay, and so you can see that there isn't actually that much clay here compared to what it looks like when you've finished rubbing up all of those little pellets that we started with in the beginning. So you've got about 1.5 blocks of clay here, and so there you are. I've moulded it into a piece. Now I just gently want to press it together, and you want to make sure that you press it together properly. So I'm just going to move this out the way, that's what we're drying on, and I'm really going to start pressing this together. Don't use your roller because you're not going to get the same amount of control out of your roller. Just press it with your hands and keep your hands on the side to make sure all of these pieces don't pop out. You want to spend a good amount of time compressing this because the paint isn't completely dry, so you can see I'm getting bits of paint on my hands, and so the little bit of paint left will help bond it together once it's finished drying overnight. So just make sure that you spend plenty of time compacting this because you don't want to have it falling apart on you when we start cutting it. And this actually on its own looks pretty nice. So you can see here it looks quite nice. So I might do a few experiments to see what it looks like if I do a few different things. So now I've rolled it out or pressed it together pretty well. I'll bring over my roller and we'll see if we can compress it even more. So you can see that this area over here isn't sticking. So you can give it a bit of a bash with your roller and this can help compress it more. So I'm not bashing that hard because it makes a bit of a noise. So I'd bash harder if I was off camera. But you want to get this into a square cane. Okay, kind of like that. That's about the right size. And you want it to be square, not round, because these pieces need to be able to fit together fairly nicely. So now I'll bring over the roller to help me square it up. And just like this. Okay, and so that's what you want to do. I might spend a little bit more time trying to compress this together because hopefully you can see that these cells are all fairly separate. But I do want to slice it just to see what it looks like inside. Oh, that looks lovely. Here we are. So you can see we have some darker areas and some cells, and if we leave this overnight, the alcohol ink is going to sink in a little bit better. And so you can see those two look quite nice together. So it looks really nice. But I do want to compress it together a little bit more. But overall I'm really happy with that. So just make sure that you leave it about 12 hours just to allow all of those inks to set in, because the longer you leave it, the more they're going to absorb into the clay. So if I bring that up, hopefully you can start to see, I'll bring over the blade. Hopefully you can see this ink starting to leach into the clay, and that takes time. So you've got to leave it for a little while. Now, the more alcohol inks you put in there, the shorter time it's going to take to leach into the clay. But the problem with putting too much alcohol ink in is it actually starts to disintegrate the outside of those cells. So the step before we put the paint on, you might have seen that some of those pieces of clay were quite soft and mushy. We put in very little alcohol, so you can imagine how adding more would have made that a lot more mushy. So it's better to add less, but then wait a little while to get it to sit together. But I'm really happy with how that looks. Now another thing that I want to try with this piece, just to show you, so I'm going to just shave this off. You can see how thin a layer that is. Now I'm going to run this through my pasta machine on the thickest setting. And I'm just going to stretch this outside bit. And you can see how running it through the pasta machine actually distorts those shapes, which can make it a little bit more interesting. And I'm running it through again. You can see that over here it's crackling a little bit. So if you've made a lot of clay, you can experiment around with it. So there you can see it's crackling quite nice over here. And over here it's distorted a bit, so it doesn't really look like turquoise anymore on this side. But you can see this side is quite interesting. So if you were going for something that wasn't really turquoise, you might want to do these cells and then just cut off the outside, because you can get a really interesting effect back here. And even on this side it looks quite interesting. So anyway, I just wanted to show you that because I wanted to do that anyway, so I thought it would be silly not to do it on camera. Okay, so I'm happy with how this is compressed together, and I'd say that this block is about 2 centimeters by 2 centimeters roughly, and so that should be a good size for us to work with, because I don't want to stretch it or anything. I don't want these cells to get distorted or anything, because you want them to stay in their shape. So I'll let that rest for 12 hours, and then I'll come back tomorrow and show you how to start assembling the necklace. Okay, so I've been letting the turquoise sit overnight, and it's actually been nearly 24 hours now because I've been quite busy today, so I didn't have time to get to it. And so I cut it in half, and what I did was I just reduced this down, so I just basically squished it down so it's a little bit of a larger square. So this is what it looks like inside, and hopefully you can see that marbling is really nice now, since the alcohol ink has kind of seeped in, it's kind of softened that blue outline. So that's what it looks like. Now I've squished it down a bit, and what I'm going to do is I'm going to take some slices, and I'm using my nice flexible blade, and there you can see what they look like inside. And we're going to make a sheet so that we can make a donut. But I just need to get some nice slices first. Okay, there we go. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to piece these slices together and press them together so that you don't have that black outline. So you see that we have an outline over here. When you lay it onto your onto the other piece of clay, you do need to overlap it, but just make sure to press it in such a way that you press that black outline over the edge and into the clay so that you don't see it. So I hope I made sense there. But here you want to basically be pressing this over. So what you would do is you would go like that so that you bevel it over, and it prevents you from actually seeing it, because that would create an unnatural line in your clay. Now what we want to do is, since these are all nice and kind of random, it means that some areas it's going to get some areas are going to have larger cells and some areas are going to have smaller cells, which is what we want. So I'm just going to roll this flat. I'm just squishing over there to prevent that line forming, or crease, whatever you want to call it. And I'm just rolling it flat because I need these cells to be a little bit bigger. Okay. And then I can maybe pop it through the pasta machine if I need to flatten it out more. But I'm doing pretty well just with my roller. And can you see that I'm rolling in all directions? This is because I want to reduce it evenly. There we are. Now I'll bring over my blade and I'll shimmy this up, and I'll check the back so you can see that all of these black veins is what we wanted to avoid on the front. And now you can take it and you can kind of hand stretch it to get these pieces kind of all stretched out and interesting, just like that. And then I'll just give it one last roll with my acrylic rod. Oops. There we go. Okay, so that's what you need to do with your turquoise for the moment. Save the rest, because you're going to want to use it for other things later on. Then I'm going to bring over a block of Primo turquoise, like the one that we used over here. And this is about 7 millimeters thick. So you can see here, and I just measured that quickly. So it's about 7 millimeters thick. And that is what you want. And you want to take your turquoise and position that onto your sheet. And I'm just choosing an area that I like, and it's got just a little pastel area over here that I want to remove and smooth over. There we go. Okay, then smooth your sheet over the top and just bring over your roller to just give it a nice firm bond. Okay. Then you're going to need a cutter, and I'm using the second largest one in my cutter set, so you can see that it's quite large. And this is the size that I want today, because I want it about the same size as this donut that I have over here, so you can see. And you're also going to want the second largest cutter in the Kemper cutter set, because that is how big I want the hole in here. Now, another thing, we're going to be making small discs from our faux coral, and those discs need to be about the same size as the hole in your donut, just to echo it, and it helps give the design a little bit more structure, just ties it together better. So however large your hole is in your donut, that is how large we want our coral pieces to be. So just keep that in mind when you decide how large you want the hole in your piece. Okay, so we've got all of that. Now we need some cling wrap. And I'm using cling wrap because I just find that it doesn't cause as many wrinkles as a normal bag would if you get it on nice and flat. So just be careful how you put it on. I'll just work that on so that I don't have any wrinkles, which can be a little bit of a challenge, as you can see. Okay, just pick that up and try again. There we go. And now smooth from one end to the other. There we go. So that can just be a little bit of a challenge, but anyway, pop it on and smooth it on as well. And then bring over your cutter, and I want to use, whoops, sorry I dropped that. I want to use my smallest one first because it helps me center it by using the smallest piece first. Now just cut that in, and you can see I've cut right through the cling wrap, so that's fine. Now I'm going to center my donut over it, but I need to have my head positioned over here so that I can see what I'm doing. There we are, positioned it. Now I'm going to press down with even pressure onto my cutter. Okay. Then I'll lift that up carefully, and I'll remove the excess cling wrap and the excess turquoise. Now what you need to do is gently lift that turquoise off. So you're going to need some form of pick for this. And so I'm going to just use this piercing needle that I have. And I first want to lift this piece out of the way. And then we're gently going to start coaxing this piece out. There we go. Can take a little time to coax it out, but once you get it going, it comes off pretty easily. There we go. And so you can see there it's given it a slight dough. Now just bring over your cutter again and just press down and rotate just to get rid of any areas that you didn't cut through completely. And I'll just get rid of that with my pin. A needle would work as well. Oops. Just go around and scrape that bit off. And there's just a little bit in there. Sorry if my head is getting in. Just get rid of that. And get rid of that. Just try and get that off. There. There we go. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to place our cutter back inside our hole. There we go. So it's nice and snug. And then what we want to do is we want to gently start pulling these edges out and down so that we cover up the turquoise around the edges. And now just go slowly with this, because you want to try and avoid getting cracks, and don't worry about fingerprints for the moment, we can fix that later. And you want to try and avoid distorting the shape as much as possible. Try and keep it in a round shape and just go slowly, and you can see that it's starting to form into a really nice donut shape. Just carry on gently pulling this down, and it forms a ridge which will slowly come down and eventually touch the bottom. But it just takes a bit of time. Now we're keeping this over here to prevent distortion, mainly. There we are, starting to make some progress. So I'll just carry on doing this until I actually have this part touching the base of my tile, because I want to hide that turquoise completely. Now the reason I've used turquoise as a base is because if the clay does crack and happen to show the underneath part, the turquoise will look somewhat natural, because that is the clay that we used originally, just with alcohol inks added in. So it's quite a nice piece of clay to use. So I'll just carry on doing this until I've finished. Okay. So I have smoothed it over completely, so just go around and check the sides and make sure that you did get it all the way down, and now you can see it's not a perfect round shape. So you want to bring over the cutter, a larger cutter, the largest cutter in the set, and use this to gently press it back into the right size. Just do that by gently rotating it around like this. Just check the sides every now and then to see if it's okay. And this will get it all domed up again. Okay. Then bring over your smaller cutter, and when it fits that size, then you stop pressing with the largest one. But until that happens, you have to carry on pressing. There we go, we're almost there. There we go. Okay, so that's the right size. Now we can take the Kemper cutter and just gently twist it out. And now if you've got little bits of excess in there, gently coax those out, because you don't want that there. Just like that. And then gently fold this part over. And now this takes a little bit more time than the outside, but you want to bring that down as well. You don't have to bring it down as far, but you do just want to bring it over the rim so that it hides most of it. So I sometimes like using my little pinky finger to help bring that down, because it's quite a small hole for my thumb. Okay, and then I'm just going to smooth around. Okay, and then I can bring over a piercing pin, which is nice, which has a nice round shape, and use that to gently smooth it out. Just by rolling. There we are. Okay, and then I'll just check, and I'll carry on going in until I am happy. And then when I'm happy with it, I'll just gently press along the outside here, just like this, until I can fit my Kemper cutter. But I still do want to bring it down a little bit more, so I'll work on that. There we are. So now just give a final twist with your outside cutter, and then just smooth over the top, making sure to get rid of fingerprints and things like that. And that is your turquoise donut. Now bring over a blade and just lift it off of the tile. And you just want to clean up inside here if you can. There we go. Now you want to place a thin sheet of turquoise over the back. So I'll make another sheet of turquoise, and then we can place it over the back. Okay, so here's the sheet that I have finished, and that was just using the excess bits that were hanging off here when we cut out the donut. So those weren't wasted. Whoops. Now I'll bring over the donut and the sheet, just lay that over the top and smooth that over to make sure we have a good connection. There we go. Now just check if I can get that in there. I'm not going to be able to, so what I'm going to do is I'm just going to bring over a piercing pin and I'm going to just cut that out. You can use a craft knife if you wanted to as well. Then I bring over this cutter and just press around the edges because I don't want to ruin the dome. Then I'm just going to rotate and move that out the way. And just scrape the edges. Move that out the way. And then what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring over this acrylic mandrel that I have, and this I'm going to use to smooth out this inside area. And I can also use it to smooth this line out a little bit where we had the cut, so that it looks a little bit more natural and beveled. Okay, then I'll go inside and just gently smooth, and just check the front just to make sure it's okay. And then I'll do the same over here. Just smoothing it out. And then once I'm done smoothing it out, I'll just smooth away fingerprints, and then I will pop it into the oven for a full hour at Primo's recommended temperature. Okay, just checking the sides. Again, just smoothing those out. Okay, so I've finished smoothing the top and the back, and so we now have it in shape. So you can see it, these edges now have been smoothed off, so they have a nice beveled edge. Same with the front here, and I've also checked the back for fingerprints. Now just lay the front on top onto the tile and just smooth for fingerprints, and then we can pop it in the oven for a full hour at Primo's recommended temperature, and then we can move on to creating the coral. So I'm just busy making sure to smooth that off nicely because we want to give that a buff. And there we are. So now I'm going to put that in the oven. Okay, so while that is in the oven, let's get started with our faux coral rondelles. So what you're going to do is we're actually going to roll this into the shape that we want. And now just take a look at your lining again now that you've had a little while to look at it, and see if you're happy with it, because we want to roll it down to a certain size. I'm just using this cutter to check the size, and I'll tell you what that size is in a minute. But just check your veining. Do you think it's a little bit too bold? And in my case, I'm not quite happy with the veining. I think it's a little bit too bold. So before I actually move on to this, I'm going to just twist it a little bit more. Now this is also pretty helpful, especially if you've been waiting like 14 to 15 hours to do this, because it means that you'll be able to warm your clay up a bit more, because you need it to be quite warm for it to work. So I'm just going to twist this clay, and it's fine if your stripes now don't appear to all be symmetrical or anything. That's actually pretty nice, so it's good to do that. But if your stripes look too bold, don't just go with it. Make sure that you do have them mottled enough that it looks good. So I'll just play with this a little bit more to make sure that I am happy with the strength of the stripes. I don't want them too strong. I want them quite blended into each other. There, I'm much happier with that. So if I bring that up, hopefully you can see now that the stripes are a lot more irregular and just look a bit more natural, which is exactly what I want. And so I've got it down to the right size so that it fits the Kemper cutter, and that is about 1.5 centimeters in diameter, in case you didn't have the cutter. Okay, so now what we want to do is we just want to cut off slices, and now I want them all to be about the same thickness as well, and that is, let me see, about 0.5 centimeter thick. Now you don't have to be exact with that, I just want to get somewhat close to it, so I'm just going to chop these all together so that I can see. And I'll just move those off to the side. And now what you want to do is you just want to form a rondelle. Now you don't want this to be a perfect rondelle, mostly because coral is a very, very natural substance, and it's, whenever you get the beads, unless they're quite expensive beads, you're going to not get complete and exact ones. So to imitate the substance that we are trying to replicate, you want to try and get it as close to the real thing as possible, and that means not having completely perfect rondelles. So I'm going to try and get it to the same size as the Kato, but roughly the same size. And now you want beveled edges as well. Just make sure that these edges are all nice and beveled. And that's basically what you want. So you can see that it's not the same thickness all the way around. It's somewhat similar, but it's not the exact same. Now you don't have to worry too much about fingerprints on the front here. We will sand it, but your main concern is this part over here, which is the part that you are going to be seeing. So just spend enough time smoothing away fingerprints on there, because that is your main concern. Now I'm actually going to go get a pair of gloves once I finish this one, because that will help me avoid fingerprints, and I think I should have done that a little while ago, but you know, I'll put that on now. But that's basically what you want. Don't worry about drilling a hole yet. We will do that later with a pin drill, because it will look much better. And so you'll make a whole bunch of those, and basically I'll make more than I need, because I want to make some other things like earrings and bracelets and things. So any leftover pieces that I have, I'm going to use. So I'll see how many I need for the necklace, and I'll tell you that at the beginning of the tutorial. Okay, so I've done about 56 of these rondelles, and now you can see that I've done a lot of variation on the size. So here's one of my fattest ones, and here's one of my thinnest ones. So you do want to variate the size. Now another thing that you want to do just on the edges is just create small imperfections in the surface, because if you ever look at the coral that you get, the beads that you get, you'll see that they have just small imperfections on them. So I prefer to use the end of a skewer to get these imperfections through, and I can also use my blade to just kind of create lines in them as well. And this will create some interest, because we are going to antique these once we're finished baking them. So just go through all of them, and I like to do it once I've finished forming all of them. So I've formed all the ones that I want, and so now I'm going to go back, now that they've kind of rested a little bit, and I'm going to just mark them up a little bit. Don't worry about this front area, because you really aren't actually going to see this area, because all of the pieces are going to be stuck together. So you really want to just focus on this edge. And now if you have bowing out over here because you pressed in it, don't worry about it. I prefer to keep it because it makes it look more natural. So I'll continue doing that with all of the other pieces. Okay, so now we are going to move on to the last piece of the project that we're going to need. So each of these balls is 1/8 of a block of Primo Turquoise, and it's the small blocks, the ones that come in these sorts of packets. So basically what I took is one seg, you get 4 of these, and I halved one of them and created 2 balls from each half. So it's 1/8 for each ball. Okay, then you want to roll those into a ball, obviously, and just smooth out any seams. And this will also warm it up, which is what you want. Okay, then you want to actually shape it somewhat into the shape that you want. Now I kind of want an oval shape, but I don't want it to be completely oval, if you know what I mean. I want it to kind of be an oval nugget. So I'm just going to shape it, and it's going to be flat on the back, so I don't need to worry too much about doming the back, but I do want to dome the front. Okay, so we form this kind of oblong shape. There we go. Then I'll do the same for the other one, and try and get it similar to this shape that you've made, so that they look almost like they're matching, but not so close that they do match, because then it's going to ruin that natural effect. So just try and get it as close as you can, but don't get it so close that they are the same. Okay, so I've made both of these, and I've also just made a sheet of turquoise like we did for the donut. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to take this and press it onto our shape gently, trying to avoid cracks, and then bring it round the other side. And just try to cover up the turquoise. We're using turquoise because it's a pretty similar colour, so if you do get any open areas, it's not going to be a major disaster. But you do want to try and cover it up as much as you can. So I'll bring over another small piece of turquoise and just cover up that hole. Okay, now you want to just work at this again and squish all of these pieces on and just get it all nice and smoothed out. Just smoothing out the back, I want to smooth out the sides, and this is going to mess up your shape a little bit, so you're going to have to fix that up just by moving it back into the shape that you want. So I want this end and this end pointed, and then I'm going to try and get it into a little bit of a longer shape, and it really depends on you what you want the shape to look like. So just muck around with it and see how you like it. And now you'll repeat this for the other one over here. Okay, I'm pretty happy with that. Now just smooth off the edges to get rid of any fingerprints, and you'll pop this in the oven for a full hour as well, because you want to make sure that that's baked properly. And then we can start prepping the beads completely for assembly, like drilling holes, and those those coral ones need to be antiqued, and they all need to be sanded as well. So next step is to start prepping them. So I'll show you that when those are finished in the oven. Okay, so I was messing around with it for a little while, and I actually decided that I really like this cylinder shape. Just think it looks a little bit more dramatic than this shape. So all you would do is you would take this and just roll it against your tile and press each side down onto your tile. Roll again and repeat pressing until you get it into a round shape. So that's pretty easy, and I just think that it creates a more interesting look. Plus it means that we can make it about the same size as the coral discs that we made, except that now we are using a solid bead plug. Okay, just make sure that you get them the same size. Yeah. And then you would also bake these for an hour, of course. There you go. So I think that looks quite nice. And now if you've got any cracks anywhere, just smooth those off gently by rolling, pressing, rolling and pressing until you remove that crack. And then I'll bake that for an hour, and then we can get on to finishing off our beads. Now, while those cylinders are baking, our donuts are finished and our coral pieces are finished as well. And now I just want to have a forenote. To prevent too many fingerprints on these, I baked them between two pieces of paper and gently burnished them so that you can see that we have very few fingerprints. It's not going to get rid of them entirely, but it will prevent a lot of it, which is nice. And here you can see that all of the edges have texture on them, and you can see that the discs have been warped because of that, so they look more natural. And they've also gone a little bit more translucent. So I'll put this aside for the moment. We'll sand it in a little while, but for now we want to start painting these. So it's time to get your gloves on and get your black paint out. Okay, so I've got a brush, got my gloves on, and I've got black paint. Any black paint will work, so you can use any cheap stuff that you have. So long as it's compatible with the polymer clay and isn't going to cause any trouble, which acrylic paint shouldn't, it should be fine. And we're going to heat set it, so don't worry if it comes off with water. We're going to first off heat set it, and then we're going to put some wax over it, just to give it a little bit more durability. So you just want to paint these edges and really get it into that texture, because that's where you want it. And then we will sand it off later, which will be easier. Then it leaves in all the pits and things. So just texture it up and just paint it all over the place. And then I'm going to popping that onto a plastic sheet or any surface that the paint can rest on without you having to worry about it getting messy will work. So now I'll just have to paint all of the discs. Now another thing, I have made 60 discs of coral so that we can divide it in 4, because we want to put those turquoise cylinders that we made between them. So I've made 60, and so there'll be 15 in each group. So you can make as many as you want, just make sure that you can divide it by 4. Also, it needs to be long enough for the entire necklace, so 60 is a good number. Okay, so I'll just carry on antiquing until I have finished all 60 discs. Okay, so now that I have finished antiquing all of those coral pieces, I'm allowing them to dry so that we can later on, when they're finished drying, I can wipe them with a wet cloth, and then we'll be able to rub off the paint that's not in the crevices. So now these have cured, and so you can see that they're nice and hard, and this one's also cured as I showed you before. Now we want to sand them, which is going to be quite a long process as they're so big, but they'll look quite nice. So you just want to start on your lowest grit, which in my case is a 400, and you want to sand the entire surface of the bead, not just the top part. You want to sand the sides, the inside the hole, the back and the front. And make sure that you do this because you want to get this to a nice shine like a normal stone would have a nice shine. If you don't have that shine, it really decreases the look of the faux effect. So if you want it to look really like turquoise, make sure that you get it to a really nice shine. So you'll start with your 400 grit, and I'm using a polishing paper, and you'll just go around the sides, front and back, and the holes, and then once you've finished that, you'll swap to your next grit, which in my case would be 600, and so on up through your grits until you reach your final grit, which in my case is an 8000, which will give me a really nice buff. And I'll do the exact same for those other cylinders that I have. And make sure you spend enough time on your lowest grit, because what it's going to do is it's going to remove all of those alcohol ink stains that are just on the surface. It's going to remove any paint marks that happen to get on there because you were smoothing it down. And it's just going to do a lot of tidying. So you really do want to spend enough time on the 400 to remove any imperfections. And so I'll probably spend a good half an hour sanding this donut, and then another half an hour for those cylinders. So I'll probably spend about the next hour sanding, just to make sure that I get as perfect as possible. Okay, so I finished sanding and buffing, and hopefully you can see what a big difference that has made. It's really nice and shiny now, and the back also has a little bit of a shimmer, and the sides are buffed, and I've given it a bit of a buff on my buffing wheel just to really shine it up. You can also hand buff it by just rubbing it against your jeans as fast as you can, but a hand buffer really does work best. And so now you can see that the stone really has cleared up. Let me just brighten this up a bit for you. There we are. And another thing that I just want to note is that if you see any cracks like this, hopefully I can direct that light so you can see, there you are. If you see cracks like that, don't worry about it. It's completely natural. So long as it's not because your bead has cracked, these sorts of cracks are absolutely fine, because they would naturally occur in turquoise anyway, because the turquoise has these little segments and things like that, so it would naturally occur, and it actually adds to the realism of your stone. I have also sanded these ones and given them a light buff, and so you can see that they're quite shiny as well. And now we also want to pop some Renaissance wax on them. So I'll bring over the Renaissance wax and I'll smear it over it, and then you would hand buff it as well, or if you had a buffing machine you would buff it. Okay, so here's the Renaissance wax, and I'm just going to open that up and bring over an old polishing cloth. You can see it's quite old. This is the one that I like to use to scrape off my wax. There we go. And then you'll just take that and apply it to the surface and give it a really high, as much buffing as you can. As you can see that it has dulled it to a certain degree, and so if your bead is really shiny just from you sanding it, unless you need to seal some stuff in, which you don't need to with this, I wouldn't recommend putting the Renaissance wax on. But if you're going to buff it on a buffing machine, it works really well. So let me just hand buff this and show you what it looks like. I'm just rubbing it against my skirt really fast and pushing hard as well, and this should shine it up quite a bit. So you can see that shines it up a bit, so it is worth it to do it with the Renaissance wax, but it will dull it to quite a bit if you don't buff it properly. So I'll do that with these and these, and then you want to let them sit for at least 10 minutes, preferably half an hour, before you start messing with them, because touching it with your hands after you've buffed with the Renaissance wax can cause the Renaissance wax to dull. So while those the donut beads and tubes are busy curing, waiting for the Renaissance wax to cure, we are now going to attend to our coral beads. And I've just got a wet wipe here, and because I use cheap paint that comes off really easily with just a little bit of water, you can see it just comes off so easily. You just want to take the wet wipe and remove that paint. You can see it's super easy. And you only want to remove it from the surface. So any areas that you can't get the paint off, that's areas that you want the paint to stay in, because those are the areas that have little dips and things in them. So you want to highlight that. So you can see how nicely that's turned out compared to these. So I would now go and wipe all of those ones, and then you want to pop them into the oven for about half an hour just to heat set this paint on so that it's got a little bit more strength to it. And then later on, once we finish sanding, we're going to pop some Renaissance wax on them. But I've now got to go wipe paint off of 60 of these. Okay, so our coral is out of the oven, and now I've spent basically the last 3 hours or so sanding them, because I wanted to sand these edges. So I'm not worrying about this part because you're not going to see this part, and I'm not worrying about that part because you're not going to see it, but I've basically just gone around and sanded these edges because that's the part that you're mainly going to see. Now that is quite time consuming, but it definitely makes a big difference. So here's one that I haven't sanded, and you can see how dull and dirty it looks compared to the others, so it's definitely worth sanding. So I've just kept them on the board there to see what I'm dealing with. So now I'll just show you how to sand this quickly. You're going to start with your lowest grit, which in my case is a 400, and just give the front and the back a quick sand to remove any paint that might be there, and that's all you need to do. Then you want to sand the edges, and now I'm twisting the bead as I'm sanding. Okay, then we move on to your next grit, which in this case is a 600, and I like to have it on a pad because it's a bit easier. So, whoops, I build up my papers. Now I got these papers off of Fine Mountain Gems, if you were wondering. And so I sand each of my beads like this until I have reached my highest grit, which in my case is an 8000. So you can imagine that it's a bit tedious, it takes quite a bit of time, but it's definitely worth it because it looks really nice afterwards. So if you choose not to sand, that's fine, it's just not going to look as good, it's not going to have that nice satin finish to it. I don't want it to have a really shiny finish, so I'm not going to buff, but it's definitely worth sanding. So I'm almost done with this, I've just got 2 more grits to go, and then I can show you how to drill them. And now I've made 60 of these little discs, in case you were wondering. So we need 4 segments, so there's going to be 15 of these discs in each segment. You can make more or you can make less, but it is going to affect the length of your necklace. Now, we also need to start thinking about some silver findings, because we do need some silver to break up the just to break up the necklace a little bit, because the silver is a very clean color, and so it's going to it's going to be something that's not so bold on the eyes. So I've chosen a few silver findings already. So I'll bring that forward again, so you can see I've planned it out. But the donut isn't where it's actually going to go. We're going to be putting a button over here. So here is the button that I have chosen, and you can see that it's a lovely silver one, and that is going to actually go where the donut is. The donut's going to hang down from the button. So I'll show you that later on when we string. But for now, I want to show you how to drill. So you'll just bring over your drill, and I'm actually going to do it on a pad of polishing paper so that I don't drill right into my tile. And this one is a pin drill, but it does it for you. So I'm just going to position it where I'm happy. Oops. And then start drilling. You just push down on the handle, and it will do the drilling for you. It's a lot quicker and a lot easier than doing it by hand. If you have a Dremel, you could also use a Dremel, though Dremel's a little bit risky, so I prefer to just do it by hand, but have this little device do it for me. So we're going to be putting 1 strand of leather through, and so what I want to do is, once I've done the hole, and it's a fairly thick hole, I'm going to bring over the leather piece that we are going to be using and see if it goes through. And if it does without catching or anything, then that's how big my hole needs to be. So I'll go and drill all of my beads actually, except for the donut, like that. Now I also just want to show you how to drill these ones, because they're a little bit different, but basically the same. They're just a bit longer. So you'll position it on your tile, center your drill, and then start drilling straight down. And now this can take a little while, of course, and you want to hold onto your bead as you do this, because it's going to want to be shaking all over the place. And every now and then maybe pick it up and just twist it around a bit to see if it actually is drilling down straight. Here, and I'll just clear out my bit. Okay, and once you've done a guide hole like that, just started it, go on to the other end and do another hole. And what will happen is these 2 holes will meet up in the center of the bead. And so if you didn't drill your hole exactly straight, you won't see it, because that meetup will be inside the bead and not on this end. And so you won't see if the hole isn't completely straight. Because if you were just to drill from one end to the other and accidentally come out in the wrong place, you wouldn't be able to fix that. Now if you're drilling, so you can see that that's in the center and that's in the center. So now you can fuss with it in the middle of the bead to get the 2 holes to meet up. And even if you completely miss each other, that's fine, because you won't be able to see that, and it's not going to affect your necklace. So now I just need to drill straight through. And you can see that because it's such a long and thick bead, it's going to take a little while. Let's see if I can do that on camera for you to show you that it does meet up. Okay. Don't think we're going to meet up. It's going to take a little while to get there. So I'll just carry on drilling until I meet up, and then I'll show you. Okay, so I finished drilling through. So hopefully you can see that it does go through. Let's see if I can get that light through. Yep, there. So then just bring over your leather cord again, see if it strings through without catching. If it does, then that's a good hole. Now another thing that I just want to point out is hopefully you can see that the one that we've drilled has lost its shine a bit. So after you've been drilling, because you're going to be holding onto this quite a bit, you're going to be messing with that Renaissance wax a bit, and so it's going to dull a bit. So if you muck around with the Renaissance wax and touch it too much, it is going to dull. So you need to go and buff this again after you've finished drilling, because you want to get it nice and glossy like this. So that's basically the types of beads that you're going to need to drill. So I'll continue drilling all of those, and then we can start assembling our necklace. Okay, so now we are ready to start stringing. So first you're going to need your donut and a length of leather, and I'll just bring this over. And then you want to fold your leather in half. So just grab these two ends that you have and have it in half. And we'll fold that loop through and then bring these guys back through and pull. Okay, and so you want that part to be on the front of your donut. Then what we'll do is I'll just bring over one end of the cord and the button that I've chosen, and it's just a silver button, just getting some stuff out of the holes. And I want to bring my leather through the one hole. I'll bring it down, then I'll bring over the other one and pop it through. And then bring it through. There we go. And then what I want to do is I want to position it so that it fits nicely. So it has to sit like that up against the donut. You want it to be tight, but you don't want it to be too close or too far away. Just like that. Then you'll bring your cord through again, through the hole. Now you can use any silver button that you want. Just we do want silver because it's going to cut through the colours. It's going to bring something clean to the design. Now you can try it with copper. I thought that copper would look actually quite nice. It's just going to give a completely different look. So if you don't feel like using silver, you can try other metals. So here's another copper one that I have. And so you can see if I place that on top of the silver, it's going to give a completely different look. But I want to go with silver today. Okay. Now, you want to bring over your chosen silver spaces, which we are going to need. And I'm just going to flip this so that I can see what's going on behind the button, because I need to fill in the space behind it, so I'm going to use these spacers to do that. So I'm just going to bring that spacer down. We're going to need another 2 spacers. String one on and bring another one. Now you need quite large hold spacers, as you can see, because they need to slide along on the cord happily. There we go, so that one of the spacers peeks out from behind the button, like that. Okay, and you do the same on the other side, but I'm just going to show you this one for the moment. Then you want to string on 5 of your coral. Now there's 15 in each segment, so I've divided that by 5, so we're going to have 5 coral, then a spacer, then 5 coral, then a spacer, then 5 coral, then a spacer, and then a turquoise piece. So I'll show you that. String on the coral, bring over a spacer, string on another 5 coral, and now I've tried to get the holes in the coral in the middle, but because we are dealing with different sizes and they're not perfectly round, so they're a little bit distorted, your coral isn't going to sit perfectly together. So don't worry about that, because that is what's going to give it a nice natural look, because we're trying to imitate what real coral does when you make beads out of it. Let me just brighten this up a bit for you. It looks a little dark. There we go. Okay, so we've strung on another 5 coral and a spacer, so they sit together nicely like that. Then you'll string on another 5, and I'm going quickly so that I can show you the entire stringing process. And now what I do on this side, you would do on the other side as well. Okay, string on another 5 coral, and then 1 more spacer. And now I've gone and rebuffed those turquoise pieces that I showed you earlier, these ones, so that they have a bit of their shine back, as you can see. And then we'll string that on after a spacer, and then you'll do another 3 of these, so you'll basically repeat what you have on this side on this side. Okay, so here it is now that I've strung both sides, so you can see that that looks pretty good. So now what we want to do is we want to attach the clasp. So I've just tied off the ends over here so that I can see where I want to attach my clasp. And so now we want to chop off these ends. And you can use a plier. I find that this blade actually does a pretty good job of creating a very flush end. So I'm just going to scooch this over. Cut that length off. Okay, then we'll move that out the way. Now what we're going to do is we're going to bring over these crimps. And you can see that they're a little bit different from the Charlotte crimps, and these are what we're going to be using. So what we need now is E6000. So here's the glue. Now what you want to do is you want to just get some of that glue out and just dip your tip in it, like that. Okay, and then I'm just going to put that cap on because we don't want that going all over the place. Then you'll pop this inside that crimp. Just press it closed. And now don't squeeze too hard that you squish the crimp. Squeeze it closed, just like that. Now that's going to hold it pretty securely, and the glue is going to do the rest. So we'll do the same for the other one, just like that. Now you're going to bring over your chosen clasp, and I've chosen this one. And a fairly large jump ring you're going to need for this type of clasp, obviously. And so I'll bring over 2 jump rings and close that up. And I'll open up that jump ring, pop it through that clasp, and there we are. And you'll do the same for the other side. Now just a quick note, you want to let that glue set for at least an hour before you start wearing this and tugging on it and things like that, just to make sure that it has properly cured. Whoops, that wasn't right. Need 1 more jump ring. Here we go. So just make sure that you have allowed it to cure long enough before you start messing with it, because otherwise you'll find that it comes unstuck, and that just isn't good. There we are. We'll slide that through. And just rotate it. Okay. And then that's that end. And this is what this end looks like. So I'll have to show you what it looks like on a stand for you to properly see what it looks like. So I'll bring you over to see. Okay, there we are. So I can show you it in the stand, so I can show you what it looks like, and I'm really happy with how it's turned out. Donut's really cool, and you'll be able to see better on the photos what it looks like. So you can see that it's quite nice. It's quite large as well, but I think it looks really nice, and that red coral really makes quite a statement against that turquoise. So that's basically it for this project, and so I do hope that it was interesting to you. If it was, please do let me know, and do send in photos of what you do using these techniques. Maybe you choose to tone the design down a little bit and maybe make just some smaller beads. That would also look really nice, but I thought that the big design showcases the techniques quite well, so that's why I chose to do that today. And as always, I hope to see you in the next tutorial. Bye for now.